Hey guys, tonight we venture into the candlelit world of Leonardo da Vinci's kitchen. Yes, you heard that right, his kitchen. Picture yourself stepping into a dimly lit Tuscan workshop with the faint smell of olive oil and wood shavings lingering in the air. Now, I know what you're thinking, Da Vinci. The painter of the Mona Lisa, the inventor of odd flying machines. Precisely. But here's the twist, we're going to explore one of his lesser-known contraptions, a mechanical rotisserie spit for roasting birds. You might be surprised, but trust me, it's a real thing, and you probably won't survive this if you're expecting a typical boring Renaissance history lesson. We're about to get delightfully sleepy with a side of gentle sarcasm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, along with your local time, because I always find it fascinating how many time zones we gather under this virtual starry sky. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the center of a moonlit courtyard, the stones underfoot still warm from the afternoon sun. Old cypress trees sway above you, their silhouettes dancing in the silent breeze. The breeze carries the distant hiss of nearby streams, and the rustling of leaves that form a kind of nighttime lullaby. Overhead, the stars glimmer, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows a bit too early. Maybe he's got an odd sense of time, or maybe he just likes to troll you before dawn. You slip through a sturdy wooden door that creaks with age. Inside, lanterns cast flickering shadows on the walls of a cramped workshop. These walls are lined with scattered sketches, each pinned to the rough stone like disorganized puzzle pieces. In the center of the chaos stands a half-finished contraption of wheels, pulleys, and rods. Leonardo da Vinci is nowhere to be seen right now, probably off snagging a quick nap or scribbling secret notes in his mirror, writing. You can almost hear him muttering about angles and torque as he prepares to transform an ordinary kitchen chore into a mechanical spectacle. At this moment, you realize that Renaissance kitchens were no joke. They were bustling, smoky centers of daily life. Imagine mountains of vegetables being chopped, large hunks of meat roasting over open fires, and bread dough rising in corners at all hours. It's a world where the hum of activity never quite dies down. The open flame roars, staff scurries with battered wooden spoons, and everything from peacocks to pheasants might be on the menu if you're feasting with high society. Historically, the average Tuscan home cooked simpler fare, basic breads, fresh produce, and maybe some poultry if it was a special day. Still, for Leonardo, everything was a puzzle waiting to be solved, cooking included. By now you notice a small draft swirling through the workshop, carrying the smell of flour and sweet wine. That draft brushes against your face, and you shiver not from cold but from the sense that you're standing on the brink of some mechanical marvel. You nudge a few sketches aside, careful not to smudge the precious ink. Some depict swirling lines and geometric patterns. Others show a rotating spit apparatus with multiple parts labeled in backward script. Mirror writing that Da Vinci used to keep curious eyes guessing. One mainstream historical fact about Leonardo da Vinci is that he left behind more than 6,000 journal pages, filled with drawings and theories on subjects ranging from anatomy to flight. These notes, often penned in that distinctive mirrored scrawl, remain a testament to his insatiable curiosity. While many are familiar with his paintings like The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa, his notebooks reveal the restless mind of a man who saw the potential for art in everything, even in the turning of a roast chicken. Of course, every genius has a quirky side. A fringe tidbit about Leonardo is that he was rumored to be so fascinated by nature that he would often purchase caged birds in the market, only to set them free. Perhaps his compassion extended even to the unfortunate fowls destined for the cooking spit. That might seem contradictory, but hey, maybe he thought, if we absolutely must roast a bird, let's do it as efficiently and elegantly as possible. You walk closer to the contraption, stepping around a stray bucket, slightly worried you might trip, causing a chain reaction that ends with gears crashing onto the floor. The machine is half your height, made from sturdy iron rods and wooden supports. Gears interlock in complex patterns. A pulley system dangles off one side. You imagine a plucked chicken skewered on a horizontal rod, rotating slowly above an open fire pit, glistening with juices. The idea is, in a practical sense, quite straightforward. Turning the spit automatically saves the cook from endless manual cranking. But because this is Da Vinci, you just know there has to be a bit of mechanical flair. Maybe a hidden spring, maybe a sneaky gear ratio that ensures the heat is distributed just right. You lean in and notice scratch marks on the rod. signs of repeated trials. Leonardo must have tested the torque again and again, perhaps adjusting angles to ensure the roast bird spins at the optimal speed. Too slow, and dinner might be charred on one side. Too fast, and you'd fling sizzling bits across the kitchen at unsuspecting kitchen staff, which is comedic to imagine but not exactly a huge hit with the cleaning crew. A first joke, check. You can almost see the kitchen staff scurrying around like, watch out, incoming drumstick. As you run a finger along the carved wooden supports, you wonder about Da Vinci's motivation. Was it purely culinary? Historians still argue whether this invention was intended to make daily cooking easier or to showcase the novelty of mechanical engineering to wealthy patrons. After all, Renaissance courts loved to flaunt extravagant banquets, and showing off a high-tech rotating roast would be quite the conversation starter among nobles nibbling on candied fruit. Then again, maybe Leonardo was simply bored and thought, why not? Standing there, the workshop feels like a hidden attic in your grandparents' house, except it's full of half-finished prototypes, not dusty holiday decorations. Your gaze drifts around the room, lingering on bizarre sketches. A water-lifting device here, a flying machine there. It's easy to imagine a parallel scene where one of Leonardo's apprentices strolls in at midnight, yawning as he wonders if the contraption they built for the Duke's upcoming feast might suddenly spin out of control and fling their dinner into orbit. So joke number 2, though let's hope the contraption can't quite achieve liftoff. You consider the bigger picture in an era before electricity and modern machinery. Building a self-turning spit must have felt like wizardry. So much of what was normal daily life back then, lighting a fire, hauling water, churning butter, was exhausting work. A device that did even one of those tasks automatically would have been revolutionary. Imagine the envious looks from neighboring towns. Have you heard about the spinning roast contraption in that Tuscan kitchen? Must be magic. Then again, practicality aside, there's something whimsical about it. It's a small leap to think that if someone can invent a mechanical bird spinner, they might just also dream up a bicycle prototype or a helicopter design. And guess what? Leonardo did conceptualize those too, at least in sketch form. He was the Renaissance man, if that makes sense. So joke number 3, because really, how else do we describe him? The lanterns flicker, and you notice your eyelids growing heavy. The hum of the nighttime insects drifts through a tiny window. One question floats in your mind: what exactly did Leonardo hope to gain? Prestige, efficiency in the kitchen, a chance to test his engineering wits in a place no one would expect. The answers might be lost to time, but here you are, a silent guest to the humble beginnings of a rotating spit that just might spin your dreams tonight. You linger in the workshop, gently brushing aside a few stray sketches that rustle like dry leaves in a draft. The lamp overhead flickers, throwing waves of light across the parchment. You notice that these sheets are not just random doodles. Some show detailed cross-sections of gears, while others feature disembodied arms or bird wings sketched with anatomical precision. Everywhere you look, you see an unmistakable hand at work, those neat, slanted lines, the left-handed mirror writing, and the uncanny ability to transform even the simplest observation into a blueprint for something remarkable. Your gaze falls on one particular set of sketches pinned to a wooden beam. At first glance, it looks like a swirling mass of lines, curves, angles, and tiny annotations in backward script. Leaning closer, you trace a spiral gear that loops around like a snail shell. Beside it are notes about rotating rods and heat distribution. As you read, you piece together that these are the earliest glimpses of what would become that famous, if somewhat underpublicized spit roasting contraption. It occurs to you that Leonardo had a habit of filling every inch of a page with what might look like chaos to the untrained eye. But you realize these swirling scribbles are a method to his brilliance. One mainstream historical fact is that Da Vinci often used the same sheet of paper for multiple subjects, scribbling a mechanical design in one corner, a study of a flower's petals in another, and perhaps the faint outline of a building or fortress in the margin. This layering of ideas made perfect sense to him, and drives modern scholars to near madness trying to catalogue every fragment in a sensible order. Scanning the sketches, you spot an odd little doodle of a cat wearing some sort of harness. It's small, scrawled near a diagram of a rotating gear. A quirky or fringe tidbit about Da Vinci is that he purportedly doodled animals in mechanical gear for amusement, though some interpret these as early attempts at designing prototypes for everything from automated toys to desks. And yes, this is a stretch, wearable contraptions for animals. Not everyone is convinced, of course. Sometimes a doodle is just a doodle. But in a world where knowledge was revered and secrets were often hidden, it's easy to imagine him dreaming up a cat, propelled something. Your attention shifts to the edges of the parchment. They're yellowed and frayed, a silent testament to centuries gone by. You run your finger lightly over the sketches, imagining how they might have felt beneath Leonardo's own fingertips. You picture him seated at a wooden desk, brow furrowed in concentration, candlelight dancing across his thoughtful eyes. Maybe it's late at night, and he's just returned from the Duke's court where he spent hours discussing the next grand feast. He'd roll out a fresh sheet of paper, sharpen his quill, and start scribbling. A mechanical spit might not be as glorious as designing a flying machine or painting the perfect portrait, but to a mind like his, no challenge was too small. You suspect some of these sketches were never meant to be seen beyond a tight circle of trusted friends or apprentices. Historians still argue whether Da Vinci intentionally guarded his designs to prevent theft, or if he simply enjoyed the secrecy. With someone as enigmatic as Leonardo, it might be both. The man was well aware of how valuable his ideas could be in the competitive courts of Renaissance Italy, and he was also known for the playful, almost cryptic way he shared his knowledge. That sense of mystery only amplifies the intrigue now, centuries later, as we try to decode the significance behind every swirl of ink. You turn to a small wooden table beside the beam, where more drawings lie in a disorganized heap. Carefully, you lift the topmost parchment. It shows a cross-section of what appears to be a large gear meshing with a smaller one. Angles, measurements, and the word rota appear in mirror writing. Your eyes follow the lines to a pulley system illustrated in the margin. A string of tiny circles might represent the chain links that would connect the gears to the spit rod. This is the heart of the invention, the synergy between rotational force and stability. Another page depicts a triangular arrangement of rods. At one corner, a weight is suspended, perhaps an early idea for a weight-driven mechanism to keep the spit spinning at a consistent pace. It's fascinating to think that, with enough fine-tuning, the entire roast could rotate itself for hours without a single tired arm in sight. Imagine the kitchen staff's relief. No more turning the handle by hand. No more singeing eyebrows while checking if the bird is browning nicely. Of course, jokes aside, you can almost picture a disgruntled servant complaining, "But that was my job," before quickly realizing the joys of delegated labor. The workshop hums with a quiet energy that makes you want to open each rolled parchment to discover more. There's something deeply intimate about seeing these original sketches, as though you're glimpsing into the private musings of an inventor who never expected a faraway visitor in the 21st century to drop by. When you pick up another sheet, you're struck by how the lines flow seamlessly from scribbles about the Rotisserie's gear ratio to a drawing of a mechanical spatula. Yes, you read that right, or at least that's what it looks like. Perhaps Da Vinci was brainstorming a whole suite of kitchen improvements, a one-man culinary revolution. You can practically hear him murmuring to himself, "If we can automate the spit, why not also invent a device to flip pastries or to stir soup at the perfect interval?" This might sound absurd now, but hey, considering we have stand mixers and robotic arms in some high-tech kitchens today, maybe Leonardo was simply too far ahead of his time. A first joke, because a mechanical spatula flipping pancakes in the 16th century would be quite the spectacle. As you leaf through the final few sheets, you note that some sketches don't seem to fit at all. One page features an anatomical study of a bird's wing, maybe to better understand how its joints move. Another focuses on tiny, swirling water eddies, research that might inform the rotational dynamics of fluids in a pot. Da Vinci was, if nothing else, a master at cross-pollinating ideas. He wasn't the type to say, "This is just for art, and that's just for science." Everything was connected, and by exploring the motion of water, or the structure of a wing, perhaps he gleaned insights into how to spin a roast flawlessly over a fire. There's also a single note scrawled in the corner of one page, something about timing the spin so the juices will not drip unevenly. You can almost see him trying to solve that universal problem of dryness in roasted poultry. Maybe he envisioned a gentle, consistent rotation that would keep the meat moist, letting the heat coat it evenly. A comedic image flashes in your mind: Da Vinci pacing in front of an open fireplace, tasting pieces of half-cooked chicken, exclaiming, "We must rotate it slightly slower on the next attempt, else the juices fly off and we're left with a husk." Second joke. Although the image of Leonardo brandishing a marinade brush is oddly endearing, you set down the final sheet, letting out a soft sigh. Despite the centuries separating you, you feel a strange kinship with the mind behind these sketches. Whether it's the mechanical spit, or one of his more famous creations, there's an unmistakable sense of wonder in every line he drew. For a moment, you imagine telling him about modern kitchens. Electric ovens, rotisserie settings at the push of a button, the beep of a timer that ensures the perfect roast every time. Would he be astounded or quietly smug, thinking, "I was onto something, wasn't I?" You straighten the pile of sketches, hoping not to disturb this fragile time capsule too much. A single flame on the lantern sputters, casting the drawings into momentary shadow. Quietly, you step back, giving them room to breathe, as though they're living objects in need of respect. Your mind buzzes with the extraordinary notion that the seeds of a futuristic cooking gadget lie right here, scattered among doodles of cats in harnesses and swirling snail gears. Third joke. Did we mention the cat? Because you're still not over that one. In the hush of the workshop, you get the sense that these sketches are more than mere curiosities. They're pieces of a grand puzzle that Da Vinci never fully assembled in his lifetime. Yet he left enough breadcrumbs for future dreamers, like you, to follow. And in a world that prizes innovation, even a half-sketched mechanical spit can spark endless ideas. Perhaps that's the true genius, the invitation to keep imagining long after the ink has dried. You feel the workshop's chill on your skin, reminding you that this cozy exploration began in the middle of a quiet Tuscan night. Even so, your curiosity is now thoroughly awake. Pushing open another creaky wooden door, you step from Leonardo's personal domain into a more bustling realm, the adjacent kitchen. Here, centuries ago, the ordinary magic of Renaissance cooking took place. Immediately, a wave of imagined warmth hits you. You can almost see the fireplace blazing, with iron pots and copper pans suspended above it, steam fogging the air. The center of the room is dominated by a large wooden table. In your mind's eye, you picture scullery maids, sleeves rolled up, kneading dough while others chop vegetables harvested from sprawling gardens just outside the villa. The glow of a dozen candles flickers along the rough stone walls, casting dancing silhouettes of busy hands and the swirl of aprons. It's the sort of place where the scent of rosemary and sage drifts lazily, mingling with the smoke from the hearth. This is the Renaissance kitchen hustle, a daily grind of preparation, preservation, and perpetually rotating tasks, from dawn until well past dusk. In a society without refrigeration or modern stoves, meals had to be orchestrated like a grand performance. Sourcing ingredients often required visits to the local market, bargaining with merchants over the price of eggs or the freshness of fish. In noble households, a head cook might oversee a small army of servants, each responsible for a specific task, like turning that spit, for instance. Enter Leonardo da Vinci with his unorthodox plan to relieve at least one of those tasks by automating it. You wander around, noticing a large hook protruding from the ceiling. Perhaps this was once used to hang a hefty pot of stew, or maybe it supported a bag of spices too precious to be left on the ground. One mainstream historical fact is that spices like black pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were incredibly valuable in Renaissance Europe, often treated almost like currency. Nobles flaunted them, while the average peasant might only catch a whiff during festival times. Some accounts suggest that entire fortunes could be spent on procuring exotic flavors from faraway lands. Now, imagine Da Vinci pondering how best to season a roast if it could turn itself and baste every inch with those fancy spices. If nothing else, it must have made for an evenly flavored meal. You sidestep a phantom cook. Well, the memory of one, anyway, and glide toward the colossal hearth. It dominates the far wall, large enough for multiple spits to operate at once. The arching stone is blackened with soot, a testament to countless feasts. You imagine the hiss of fat dripping into the flames, the crackle of wood, and the swirl of savory scents that would fill every inch of the room. The hustle must have been intense. In a large Renaissance household, there could be several courses in a single meal: meats, soups, breads, pastries, and always an impressive display of fruit or sweets for dessert. The idea of a mechanical spit spinning away, freeing a pair of hands for other tasks, would have been a game changer. Standing there, you can't help but think of all the daily chores that must have weighed on the staff. Slaughtering and plucking the birds, mixing dough, grinding spices, clarifying the heavy wines, and overseeing every simmering pot. Perhaps for Leonardo, the impetus to create an automated spit came from a genuine desire to streamline one corner of this hectic environment. Or maybe it was part of a bigger scheme, like showcasing a spectacle at court, encouraging the Duke to say, "Look at the wonders my personal engineer can create!" First joke: imagine the Duke's dinner guests, eyes wide, exclaiming, "Does your roast spin on its own? Ours still needs a servant, how terribly old-fashioned." you recall how many of Da Vinci's mechanical contraptions were deeply rooted in practicality. Yes, he had grand dreams of flying machines, giant crossbows, and elaborate siege engines. But he also spent time studying how to divert rivers, how to improve city sanitation, and indeed how to improve that everyday chore of turning a roast. A quirky or fringe tidbit arises when you consider that some letters and anecdotal evidence suggest Da Vinci may have been something of a vegetarian, or at least had complicated feelings about eating meat. Yet here he was, designing a better device to roast a bird. Contradiction? Perhaps, but that's part of what makes his life so endlessly fascinating. You kneel beside a sturdy wooden barrel, tipping the lid to peek at some ancient grains that might still cling to the bottom if time had frozen this place. The staff would have used these grains to bake the daily bread that formed a staple of the Renaissance diet. For wealthier families, the flour was milled more finely, resulting in a lighter loaf. For the poorer class, it might be a coarser, darker loaf. Often, bread was essential not just for eating, but also for sopping up the sauces, effectively cleaning the plate and ensuring no morsel went to waste. In a sense, the spit contraption's entire reason for being was to produce the perfect piece of roast to go with that beloved bread. Historians still argue whether Da Vinci's invention reached widespread use in his own time or remained a novel idea tucked away in his notebooks. Some claim that the concept was demonstrated at several noble banquets, making a modest splash among the culinary elite. Others suspect it was never fully realized, perhaps too costly or delicate for the rough conditions of a smoke-filled heat-blasted kitchen. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Maybe a prototype or two made an appearance, only to be overshadowed by bigger commissions and more pressing concerns. You reach out to imagine gripping the handle that once hung beside the hearth. In many households, even minor tasks like turning a spit were done by specialized workers, often young pages or lower-ranking servants. The job was hardly glamorous: stand by a hot fire, rotating the handle at a steady rhythm for hours on end. Now, that might seem like a snooze-worthy assignment, but hey, at least you'd have a front-row seat to the sizzling progress of dinner. Second jokey, you can almost hear a bored servant thinking, if I could just tie a rope to the cat's tail and let it run around in circles, I'd be free. Thankfully, Da Vinci's design was a bit more humane. The bustle of a Renaissance kitchen was far from quiet. Knives clacked on chopping boards, water boiled in iron cauldrons, and flames crackled with bright embers shooting upward. Now and then, you might catch snatches of gossip, perhaps about which aristocrat had the most lavish feast, or whose son was off fighting in the wars that periodically raged across Italy's patchwork of city-states. Your ears perk when you think about how news traveled through the kitchens of noble homes, carried by servants who overheard whispered courtly plans. A cunning device like Da Vinci's spit might have garnered a fair bit of attention, too, as word of mechanical marvels always seemed to spread with a dash of embellishment. You can picture a young apprentice standing in the corner, blinking through the smoke, trying to memorize every gear and pulley so he could replicate the design in his own home someday. After all, if you could harness this rotating wonder, you might impress a potential bride, or maybe charm the local tavern owner into letting you set up a roast, corner-side business. A third joke, that moment when someone tries to pass off Leonardo's automatic chicken spinner as their own invention in a local cook-off, only to watch the gears fly off when the crowd starts cheering too loudly. In this swirl of imagination, you sense how the hustle of the Renaissance kitchen intersected with Da Vinci's restless desire to improve the mundane. Gone were the days when turning a spit could only be done by a human hand, or perhaps a dog-powered treadmill spit. Yes, that was actually a thing in some places, though not necessarily in Leonardo's. Automated solutions were on the horizon, and Da Vinci's sketches were a glimpse of what might be possible when art, science, and necessity collided. Letting the warmth of this envisioned kitchen fade, you step back toward the workshop door. You leave behind the mental cacophony of cooking chores, the fragrance of roasting herbs, and the faint image of a servant smiling in relief as the mechanical spit does his job. You're left with a renewed appreciation for the everyday marvels that once captured Leonardo's attention. In a world where many inventions aimed for grand military or architectural feats, here was a man who didn't mind getting his hands a little floury in the pursuit of better roast chicken. You slip back into the workshop, letting the memory of that lively kitchen fade into the background. Your eyes land on the half-finished machine again, the gears and rods forming shadows against the stone walls, as if beckoning you closer. You settle into a worn wooden stool in the corner, imagining how this curious contraption traveled from a swirl of pencil lines on parchment to an actual mechanical wonder that might have clanked and hummed in front of a roaring fire. In your mind, you see Leonardo da Vinci pacing in this very spot, sleeves rolled up, hair a little more disheveled than usual, and a small hammer in hand. The table before him would have been scattered with metal fragments, bits of wood, and half-used candles dripping wax onto his notes. Despite the clutter, he'd have a laser-like focus on bringing his scribbles to life. One mainstream historical fact about Renaissance engineering leaps to mind in this era: artisan guilds were crucial to projects like these. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and other skilled tradespeople collaborated on everything from fortress walls to delicate clock mechanisms. And while Da Vinci might have done the conceptual heavy lifting, you suspect he occasionally enlisted such experts to forge precise gears or shape wooden frames. You spy a pile of iron scraps in a corner, relics of those first rough attempts. One piece bears a jagged edge where it might have snapped under stress, possibly from Da Vinci testing the torque required to turn a hefty bird over the fire. You chuckle at the mental picture, the device finally spinning, only to clang dramatically to a halt because the metal wasn't tempered quite right. First joke, a metal meltdown. You imagine a panicked assistant shouting, "Chef, we have a meltdown in the poultry department." Edge closer to a wooden bench, where a rudimentary gear assembly sits. It's a little smaller than you'd expect, easily held in two hands. Turning it tentatively, you watch the teeth interlock with a second gear. The movement is surprisingly smooth, hinting at a level of craftsmanship that goes beyond simple tinkering. Even though it's centuries old in your time, traveling imagination, you sense the careful adjustments that went into shaping each tooth. As you toy with this gear, you think about the prototyping phase, how each version of the spit might have evolved from trial to error, back to trial again. Historically, large workshops, or botic, often served as communal spaces for apprentices. They'd run errands, keep the place tidy, and assist the master in assembling prototypes. You can practically see a wide-eyed apprentice handling small tasks under Leonardo's watchful gaze. Maybe that poor apprentice had to clean up the mess whenever a gear shattered, or if a test roast ended in a volley of hot grease. Second jokey, you can hear the apprentice exclaim, "Next time, master, let's invent a grease shield before we do another test." Turning back to the main contraption, you notice a heavier central rod fixed to the frame. This rod, you realize, is the axis on which the spit would mount. A system of pulleys or weights might have controlled its rotation. The practicality is impressive in theory. Once the weights were lifted and set in motion, the spit could keep turning for a decent stretch of time without any human intervention. It's a concept reminiscent of clockmaking technology, where weighted gear systems can measure hours. Here, though, the measure isn't time alone. It's also the perfect roast. Yet not everything went smoothly. Historians still argue whether Leonardo actually completed a fully operational prototype, or if he merely toyed with partial builds. Some accounts mention a demonstration before an Italian nobleman, perhaps the Duke of Milan, where the spit worked beautifully for a short time. Other narratives insist that the contraption was too delicate for the intense heat and daily grind of a real kitchen. The truth might be a bit of both. Maybe it worked under controlled conditions but faltered in the rough and tumble environment of actual meal prep. A quirky or fringe tidbit crosses your mind. There's a rumor that Da Vinci once tried to harness steam power in an early cooking device, though the evidence is scant. Some say his notebooks included sketches of a steam-driven spit, but those may have been purely theoretical. Whether it's truth or legend, it shows the boundless curiosity he brought to every challenge, always looking for a more elegant solution. Your fingers graze a small wooden box on the bench, which rattles with bits of hardware and a coil of thin metal springs. You can picture Leonardo selecting the right spring to balance the gear tension, adjusting it by micrometers, or the Renaissance equivalent, until the spit spun smoothly and consistently. It wouldn't have been an easy task. Too strong a spring, and you might end up with a whirlwind roast, flinging poultry juice across the room. Too weak a spring, and your dinner might stop turning halfway through, resulting in a half-cooked, half-burnt monstrosity. The third joke, you imagine a comedic half-roast special, lovingly described by the cookers, or one side well done, the other side suspiciously pale. Stepping around the contraption, you notice a faint scorch mark on the wooden floor, shaped like a sprawling splash. Did an early test fling sizzling oil there? You picture a startled apprentice darting for a bucket of water, while Leonardo calmly notes adjustments to his design. This was the reality of prototyping in a time when every new invention teetered on the edge of triumph or fiery disaster. And yet, amidst all these mechanical hurdles, you sense a quiet satisfaction in the design. Da Vinci's approach wasn't just about brute force. He seemed to favor elegance, balancing the weight, ensuring minimal friction, and employing well-crafted gears. Looking at modern rotisserie ovens, you can't help but see a lineage that might trace back to these very prototypes. Whether directly inspired or merely parallel developments, it's a testament to the timelessness of good engineering. As you circle around the bench, a small draft from the door nudges the drawings on the wall, causing them to flutter. You catch a glimpse of a rough diagram depicting multiple gear ratios. Beneath it, an arrow points to a scribbled note in mirror writing, likely a reminder to refine the tooth spacing or test a heavier counterweight. Each mark stands as an echo of Da Vinci's iterative process, a method that modern innovators would recognize as prototyping. Once-seen design, build, test, revise, repeat. Pausing to reflect, you wonder at the combination of artistry and engineering that defined so many of Leonardo's works. The same mind that dissected cadavers to understand muscle tension also fiddled with cogs and pulleys to roast a chicken more efficiently. This fluidity between seemingly disparate fields is what made him stand out. He never saw a boundary that said, this belongs to science, and this belongs to art. Everything fed into everything else. You lean in, eyes tracing the last major component of the spit design, a bracket where the bird's skewer would be secured. A simple wooden handle rests on the side, perhaps for manually adjusting the contraption if needed. It's a nice reminder that even the most advanced mechanical aids in the Renaissance weren't entirely hands-free. There had to be a manual override. Because let's face it, if the roast started spinning out of control or the tension gave out, you'd want to intervene before dinner literally went up in smoke. Satisfied that you've gleaned the essence of how pencil lines became prototypes, you let your mind wander to the next logical step, testing the device under real-world conditions. You imagine the tense excitement in a grand hall as the nobility whispers about the newfangled invention that promises an impeccable roast. But for now, you're content to remain in the hush of this workshop, where each gear and spring tells a story of trial, error, and the stubborn pursuit of functional beauty. The lantern on the far side of the room flickers, almost as though it's winking at you. Taking one last look at the assembly, you stand and stretch. Maybe you're not forging metal or sanding gears tonight, but you can appreciate the patience and dedication it took to bring these sketches into tangible form. And with that realization, you feel a gentle sense of camaraderie with the Renaissance's most restless inventor, someone who saw the promise in a single turning axle, in the interplay of cogs, and in the possibility of a perfect roast spinning over a Tuscan hearth. Quietly, you imagine yourself slipping into a hidden alcove of that Tuscan kitchen on a day when, at last, the contraption was primed for a test run. The large hearth crackles, and a few servants stand by, eyes full of both excitement and dread. After all, this is the moment that Leonardo's contraption moves from theoretical brilliance to real-world mess, or triumph. The tension is thick enough to slice with a dull butter knife. The setup is surprisingly elaborate for what amounts to a single turning spit. You spot large counterweights, reminiscent of old clock towers, hanging from a sturdy beam overhead. A series of gears and pulleys connect these weights to the spit rod, which already has a seasoned bird skewered in place. The plan is simple. Once the weights are raised and released, they should gently unwind, spinning the spit at a controlled speed. It all sounds great in theory, until the moment someone actually lifts the weights and sets them into motion. Immediately you hear a clunk and a whirring noise. Then, the spit begins to rotate, and keep rotating, and keep rotating. At first, everything seems perfect. The bird spins in a leisurely circle over the glowing embers, the aroma of its seasoning wafting through the air. You can almost see the tiny grin on the head cook's face, imagining a future where he never again has to bark at a servant for letting the roast overcook on one side. But then, with no warning, there's a sharp twang, the kind of sound that signals something has gone just a bit sideways. One of the gears catches, then jolts, and in the blink of an eye, the bird is whipped around so fast it's a blur of sizzling poultry. At first joke, you picture one of the kitchen maids ducking behind a barrel with a shriek, "Duck!" Or is it chicken? As you watch, riveted, the turning rod thumps against the frame, rattling the entire apparatus. Smoke billows more furiously, and fat splatters onto the embers below, sending a flurry of sparks dancing up the chimney. A few onlookers stand there transfixed, as if they can't decide whether to run for cover or applaud. Someone shouts for water, while another tries to wrestle the jammed gear free. In the chaos, you catch a glimpse of Leonardo himself, ever in your mind's eye, of course, stepping forward with measured calm. He's clearly not thrilled by the malfunction, but there's a certain twinkle in his eye. He's learning something new with every clang and clank. Historians still argue whether these misfires actually happened during a grand demonstration or just in the privacy of smaller kitchen trials. Some believe that accounts of near misses, like the rumor of a blazing tapestry catching fire from flying grease, were exaggerated by gossip-loving courtiers. Others suspect that at least one real fiasco took place before Leonardo worked out all the kinks. Either way, the comedic image of a roast spinning wildly enough to fling scalding juices in every direction has survived the centuries. Watching from your hidden nook, you can't help but burst into silent laughter at the scene. The mechanical marvel that's supposed to spare someone the trouble of rotating the spit is now spinning so vigorously, it's basically painting the walls with oil. A second joke. At least it's an improvement over the usual method. No tired arms, just scalded faces. Of course, this might not have been so funny for the hapless staff who had to scrub the walls later, or the kitchen assistant nursing a burn on his arm. Eventually, the clamor dies down, and the weights are locked back into place with a resounding clunk. People hover around the machine, poking at it with iron tongs as though it's a sleeping dragon that might awaken again at any moment. Leonardo quickly steps in to assess the damage: a bent rod here, a misaligned gear there. He jots notes in a small pad or on any scrap of parchment he can find, probably scribbling down ideas for stabilizing the rotation and smoothing the gear transition. One mainstream historical fact about mechanical inventions in the Renaissance: it was common to learn through trial and error. There were no standardized engineering textbooks or widespread machine shops to crank out identical parts. Craftsmen often had to shape each gear by hand, forging metal in local smithies and adjusting things on the fly. Because of this, even brilliant designs could suffer repeated failures before hitting that sweet spot of reliable functionality. Curious onlookers slink back, returning to their usual tasks: chopping onions, stirring soups, and kneading duff. But the memory of that spat slinging, nearly out of control rotisserie lingers. You can almost feel the tension in the air as they eye the machine, silently hoping that the next test won't send them ducking for cover again. A few of them might even whisper about Leonardo behind his back as a genius, but I'd rather not lose an eyebrow if he can't fix that thing. Step by step, Da Vinci tweaks the design. Maybe he shortens one of the rods, or redesigns a gear with finer teeth. The next test is only marginally better. The spit turns without flinging poultry quite as violently, but it's still inconsistent. The rotation speeds up, slows down, and sometimes stops altogether if the weight doesn't release smoothly. Another meltdown, another round of scorching grease. You can almost hear Leonardo's sigh as he wipes his brow with a linen cloth. A quirky or fringe tidbit you recall: some accounts, likely half legend, half truth, say that Da Vinci once contemplated hooking up a small windmill-like device to utilize the heat rising from the fire itself to power the spit. The hot air would theoretically spin a fan, which in turn would spin the spit. Whether he ever tried to build such a contraption is unclear, but the notion of harnessing heat for mechanical work was definitely toyed with in his notebooks. And if you think about it, that's the sort of outside-the-box approach we've come to expect from him. Why rely solely on weights when nature can lend a hand? With each attempt, you imagine the circle of watchers, growing both bolder and more amused. Perhaps on the third or fourth go, a few servants even place bets on how long the spit will turn before conking out, or how many degrees the bird will spin before juices go flying again. The third joke: 10 florins on exactly 4 rotations. And keep that mop handy. It's the Renaissance equivalent of a kitchen sideshow, reminding you that even in historical times, people could find humor in mechanical mishaps. The important thing, though, is that each misfire leads to an incremental improvement. By the time the contraption is ready for what you might call a public unveiling, it's probably past half a dozen kitchen tests, each one slightly less disastrous than the last. Servants are no longer scattering at the sound of a gear engaging. Instead, they're cautiously optimistic, ready to see if this invention will really save them hours of leaning over the fire. The entire process gives you a deeper appreciation for just how precarious it can be to turn an idea into reality. Even the greatest of minds can't escape the grunt work of prototyping. The contraption might look elegant on paper, but in real life, metal gears grind, wooden frames warp under heat, and the unpredictability of open flames adds a dash of danger to the whole affair. Finally, You see a flicker of triumph in Leonardo's expression as the spit spins at a gentler, more controlled pace. The smell of roasting poultry becomes downright mouth-watering. A hush falls over the room when the head cook carefully checks the temperature of the bird, nods in approval, and signals that, indeed, the dinner will be perfectly cooked with minimal manual intervention. In that quiet moment, you sense an almost reverent gratitude. Even the skeptics might concede that this mechanical wizardry has promise. You drift away, letting the crackle of the fire and the drip of fat into the embers fill your ears. The comedic misfires and near misses have left you with a renewed sense of how real ingenuity is forged through patience, perseverance, and a willingness to face the occasional flying piece of roast. As you slip back into the corridor, the rhythmic sound of steady gears turning follows you, a reassuring sign that, despite the danger and the drama, the machine is finally finding its groove. You can almost see how whispers take root in the corridors of the grand estates scattered across the rolling Tuscan hills. It starts with a kitchen maid bragging to a messenger about this bizarre, spinning bird contraption she's witnessed. That messenger passes the tale to a stable hand at another villa, who then shares it with a traveling bard. By the time the rumor reaches a noble court, the story has inflated into something quite spectacular. Leonardo da Vinci has built a clockwork oven that sings arias while it roasts a peacock. First joke, next thing you know, people will say it can juggle lemons too. Our Renaissance rumor, mongering at its finest. You wander through an ornate hallway in one such estate, thick tapestries lining the walls and polished marble underfoot. The faintest echo of clattering plates and hushed voices drifts from a banquet hall nearby. Today, there's a feast in honor of a visiting dignitary, an aristocrat from a neighboring region, enthralled by tales of mechanical wonders. You slip through a side door, stepping into the bustling preparation zone behind the scenes. Servants hurry about, arms full of dishware, while a head steward, face red from stress, barks instructions. Everyone is on edge, determined that tonight's dinner will go flawlessly. In a corner of the kitchen stands the star of the show, a refined version of Da Vinci's Rotisserie device. Gone are the squeaky gears and shaky wooden supports. In their place, a sturdier iron frame and a more polished arrangement of pulleys. From your vantage point, you see a pair of cooks carefully hoisting the counterweights into position. Nearby, a marinated pheasant glistens on the spit. The hush that falls over the room is almost reverent, like they're about to witness a sacred rite of culinary alchemy. Suddenly, a steward in fine but slightly soot-stained attire appears at your side, whispering about how these newfangled contraptions have tongues wagging all over Italy. He's heard everything from claims that it was originally designed as a war machine. Ridiculous, but some rumors persist to suggestions that Da Vinci drew inspiration from ancient Greek automata. One mainstream historical fact is that, indeed, automata, mechanical devices often designed to mimic living creatures, had been discussed as far back as Hellenistic times, particularly in Alexandria. So maybe there's a nugget of truth in the rumor after all. You watch as the cook signals to a servant, who loosens a small brake. The gears engage with a faint metallic click, and the spit begins its graceful turn. No sudden lurches, no menacing whir. Instead, the pheasant revolves slowly, almost hypnotically, as the open flame licks at its seasoned skin. The hush in the kitchen deepens, and you can sense the collective exhale of relief. There's a subtle nod from the steward, and everyone resumes their tasks, confident that dinner will proceed without comedic disaster. Still, you overhear snatches of conversation, how the Duke's cousin insists that Da Vinci's contraption harnesses magnetism, which is definitely not how it works, or that it's powered by the collective sighs of angels. Second joke, culinary angels, presumably, who can't resist a good roast. The more far-fetched the rumor, the more it seems to spread, and in a Renaissance court full of intrigue and competition, any novelty that dazzles the eye and quickens the imagination is bound to be the talk of the town. A footman slips past with a tray of bread and wine, nearly colliding with you. Apologizing under his breath, he confesses he's off to greet another wave of guests curious to see the miraculous spinning bird. Meanwhile, over by the fire, a stout cook carefully bastes the pheasant, ensuring that each revolution coats it with a thin layer of fragrant sauce. You can almost taste the rosemary and garlic in the air, your senses alive with the promise of a hearty feast. Historians still argue whether these rumors played a role in elevating Leonardo's status among the nobility, or simply amused them for a while. Some accounts claim that interest in the spinning spit opened doors for him to secure more significant commissions, like grand architectural projects or magnificent waterworks. Others suggest that the contraption was just a small footnote in the myriad of Da Vinci's innovations, overshadowed by more glamorous feats. Either way, the contraption's existence became part of the tapestry of stories that shaped his legend. You find yourself drifting through a side corridor where a few courtiers have gathered, dressed in lavish silks and velvets. They talk in hushed, excited tones about the upcoming dinner. One lady fans herself dramatically, confiding to a friend that she heard the bird would spin so perfectly that it would appear as if it's floating. Another claims that Da Vinci himself might be in attendance, ready to adjust the gears with a wave of his hand. You half expect them to say he'll conjure lightning from the sky to sear the pheasant in seconds. A third joke, just wait. Next month they'll say he invented a portal for time, traveling turkeys. Stepping away from the cluster of gossips, you move closer to the main hall. The aroma intensifies, merging with the heady fragrance of spiced wine. Along a high table, you notice platters of fruits, cheeses, and elaborately sculpted pastries shaped like mythical creatures. Dragons and phoenixes perched among the grapes. Such visual splendor is standard for a Renaissance feast. It's as much about performance as it is about sustenance. Each dish is a flourish, a symbol of the host's wealth and sophistication. Eventually, a servant announces the roast is ready. Heads pivot toward the entrance of the hall as a group of attendants carefully wheel in the spit. Yes, wheel it in. Someone has rigged a modest cart so that the spinning bird can be showcased before it's carved. The device looks strangely regal, bedecked in polished metal fittings. The pheasant's skin is a perfect golden brown, glistening with juices. You catch a fleeting grin on the face of one of the cooks, proud of this mechanical wonder and the succulent feast it promises. A round of appreciative murmurs ripples through the assembled guests. A few stand to get a better look, curiosity written all over their expressions. Whispers float about how the machine actually works, some guessing it's clockwork, others suspecting hidden servants cranking gears behind a drape, which, let's be honest, would defeat the entire purpose. A curly-haired courtier in an extravagant velvet jacket exclaims that this is truly the future of feasting, though in reality, it's just one piece of the meal. Still, the spectacle delights them all. Off to the side, you notice a small knot of skeptics. They peer at the contraption as if expecting it to malfunction any second. Perhaps they're disappointed it's not launching the bird across the hall, but they remain aloof, rolling their eyes whenever someone praises Leonardo's genius. You sense they might be envious. Renaissance courts thrived on rivalries. After all, if Da Vinci's mechanical feats attract too much praise, what does that mean for other inventors or for the illusions that traveling magicians might present at court? In the end, the bird is carved and served. The contraption is gently wheeled away, leaving behind a swirl of rumors and a lingering air of wonder. You watch as the guests indulge in their meal, some too busy devouring the succulent pheasant to continue speculating. Others, especially the younger courtiers, keep glancing toward where the machine disappeared, as if they might catch another glimpse of it in action. Moving quietly to a corner, you smile at how easily curiosity has rippled through the noble crowd. You've just witnessed one of the earliest examples of culinary technology showboating, a testament to how novelty can amplify even the most routine kitchen task. Indeed, you suspect that if Da Vinci had chosen to automate the kneading of dough or the stirring of a stew, it might not have generated this level of gossip. But a spinning roast? Now that's a conversation starter. When the final platter is cleared, you slip away, leaving the courtiers to debate the contraption's secrets. As you retreat to the quieter corners of the estate, you can't help but marvel at how the simple act of turning a bird over a fire became such a social phenomenon. To you, it's a glimpse into the Renaissance mindset. If something can be made new, mysterious, or even a little magical, then it becomes far more than the sum of its parts. You find yourself in a quieter moment, after the bustle of courtly feasts and grand demonstrations has died down. The moon hangs low over the Tuscan hills, bathing the workshop windows in pale silver. Most of the household sleeps, but the telltale glow from a single lantern reveals that Leonardo da Vinci is once again at his workbench, tools scattered haphazardly around him. Through the crack in the door, you see him hunched over, forehead creased in concentration, as he fiddles with tiny metal parts. A gentle creak announces your entrance, but Leonardo scarcely looks up. His focus is riveted on a newly forged gear, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. You step closer, noticing how carefully he sizes its teeth, holding it against a second gear to ensure they'll mesh perfectly. You can sense the hush of the workshop around you. The only sound is the faint rasp of metal file against gear edge. It's another late night adjustment session, the kind that has become routine as Da Vinci strives to refine his mechanical rotisserie device. In the flickering lamplight, you see a piece of parchment pinned to the table, schematic with multiple gear ratios drawn in fine lines. Leonardo's signature mirror writing snakes through the margins, noting torque calculations and potential friction points. You recall how, in the daylight hours, he might have performed tests in front of watchful eyes, dealing with the comedic misfires that saw poultry spinning off kilter. But now, in the stillness of midnight, he seems unhurried, content to give each component the attention it demands. One mainstream historical fact drifts to mind. Da Vinci is known for his meticulous studies of friction, even though formal friction laws wouldn't be scientifically outlined in detail until centuries later by men like Guillaume Montons. Yet here is Leonardo, centuries ahead of the curve, marking down observations on how different materials rub against each other and how to reduce wear on gear teeth. This knowledge not only helped with his spit roasting contraption, but influenced a whole range of mechanical designs in his notebooks. You glance at the corner of the workbench, where a small selection of pulleys and ropes lies coiled. These were once part of the original prototype, but after trial runs that resulted in near meltdowns and comedic splatters of hot grease, Leonardo seems to be reconsidering their arrangement. You pick up a pulley, turn it in your hand, and feel how smoothly it rotates. If everything goes according to plan, the combination of pulleys, weights, and gears will let the spit revolve at a gentle, even pace. No more midnight surprises or singed eyebrows. As a first joke, you can almost hear a kitchen staff member sigh in relief. Finally, we can roast a bird without wearing chainmail helmets. Meanwhile, Da Vinci taps a finger against the half-assembled frame for the contraption's next iteration. It's more compact than the early versions you recall, with stronger metal supports. He's added small notches along the edges, possibly to fine-tune the tension of the ropes. On a spare sheet of parchment, you spot a quick sketch of a tension gauge, an idea that might let him monitor how much force is being exerted on the spit at any given moment. This kind of detail orientation, you realize, is exactly what sets him apart from the average tinkerer. Historians still argue whether Leonardo's interest in cooking gadgets was fleeting or part of a broader fascination with automating repetitive tasks. Some say he just dabbled in kitchen inventions as side projects, while others believe he viewed culinary mechanisms as stepping stones to more ambitious engineering feats. Standing here under the dim lantern glow, you suspect he'd laugh at those debates. He seems fully immersed, as though even the humblest of tasks is worthy of his best ideas. At one point, he sits back, rubbing his eyes. You notice the faint smell of ink and hot metal in the air. A second lamp flickers beside him, illuminating more scribbled notes, measurements, angles, and cryptic shorthand that only he, Sever, and perhaps a trusted apprentice could decipher. He yawns but doesn't stop working. There's a new spring to test, coiled tightly on the bench, and he carefully attaches it to a small lever that will release the counterweight at the proper moment. That, he hopes, will avoid the comedic flaw where the spit either took off like a deranged carousel or ground to a halt after a single rotation. You find the quiet strangely comforting. No clamor of the feast hall, no prying eyes from nobility, just a man and his machine, learning from each failure, adjusting gear ratios by the smallest increments. You catch yourself reflecting on how modern engineering labs aren't so different from this scene. True, we have bright fluorescent lights and fancy measurement tools, but the spirit of tweaking and testing remains. A quirky or fringe tidbit pops into your head. Some suggest that Da Vinci was so enraptured by gears that he might sometimes dream about them, vivid, mechanical fantasies swirling in his sleep. Whether that's fact or imaginative lore, it's not hard to believe. Standing here, you sense how gears dominated his mental landscape, from the flights of his imagined helicopters to the slow rotations of this cooking spit. His is the mind of someone who sees patterns of motion everywhere, including the most unexpected corners of daily life. He sets the newly filed gear down, picks up a second, and tests how they mesh. As he turns one gear, the other responds smoothly, the teeth gliding together like old dance partners. Satisfied, he fits them onto a small axle. And then, in a gesture that feels almost tender, he rotates the axle by hand, confirming the friction is minimal. A faint click with each tooth is the only sound. No squeak, no grinding. You sense his quiet triumph in that instant. A second joke you half expect him to do a little victory jig around the workshop, but he settles for a satisfied grunt. You imagine the kitchen staff's reaction if they could see him now. They might be sleeping soundly, relieved that the next version of this device won't catapult dinner into the rafters. Or maybe some curious apprentice is just beyond the door, peeking in to glean mechanical wisdom. Either way, a stable, fully functioning spit would simplify their daily drudgery. And perhaps that's what keeps Da Vinci working through the night. This notion that, for all the showmanship, there's real practical benefit in what he's creating. Yet, for all his perfectionism, you know the next test could still expose new flaws. The heat of the fire, the weight of different birds, each variation might demand a fresh tweak. Even if he masters this version, there's every chance he'll dream up an even more streamlined design next week. That's just the nature of a restless inventor. His third joke, it's a good thing he wasn't asked to design a spinning platter for soup, or they'd still be cleaning chowder off the ceiling. As the night deepens, Da Vinci finally steps away to stretch his arms. You notice flecks of metal on his sleeves, little reminders of hours spent filing and shaping. The contraption on the bench looks closer to completion than ever before. Smooth gear interplay, calibrated pulleys, and a newly stabilized frame, each part refined to play its role in harmony. You can't help but wonder how future generations might view such dedication. Would they see it as an odd footnote in the career of a legendary artist and engineer? Or as a testament to the idea that no invention is too small to merit unwavering passion? In truth, it's both. The same mind that gave us groundbreaking anatomical sketches and conceptual flying machines also poured hours into rotating a roast in the most efficient way possible. Historians still puzzle over this breadth of interests. Was it genius scattered in every direction, or a cohesive worldview that everything was interlinked? Drowsiness tugs at your eyelids, mirroring Leonardo's own fatigue. He quietly snuffs one of the lamps, leaving only a single flame dancing on the workshop walls. The battered prototype from earlier stands in the corner like a retired sentinel, overshadowed by its soon-to-be successor. You sense that come dawn, he'll give it one more run. Perhaps a small poultry test in the private hearth to see if the refinements hold. For now, you watch as he tidies up, placing the freshly shaped gears in a cloth pouch. With a final glance at the updated blueprint, he extinguishes the last lamp. The workshop descends into soft darkness, and only the silhouettes of mechanical parts remain, silent witnesses to his unrelenting quest for a perfectly rotating roast. Maybe tomorrow he'll succeed with minimal comedic splatter, or maybe he'll be back here tomorrow night, filing gears once more. Either way, you slip out with the warm reassurance that true innovation, whether for art, warfare, or the humble act of roasting poultry, depends on these late night hours, the quiet tinkering that separates daydream from reality. Morning light washes over the workshop, revealing that Leonardo's final round of tinkering seems to have paid off. You notice the polished gears and sturdier frame of the upgraded device, poised for its big moment. Word has spread. Tonight, the Duke is hosting an extravagant banquet, a lavish affair where noblemen, merchants, and influential scholars will all convene. Everyone is abuzz about the rumored roast of the century, set to be turned by Da Vinci's contraption in front of the most discerning eyes Italy can offer. You walk into the courtyard as the sun hits its midday zenith. Servants hurry in and out, balancing crates of produce and clucking fowl. The scent of fresh herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary, drifts on the breeze. Over by the carriage house, you spot a group of stable hands unloading barrels of wine. Even from this distance, you can tell the preparations are on a grand scale. The Duke wants nothing short of a culinary spectacle, and this mechanical spit is expected to be the jewel in the feast's crown. By late afternoon, the Great Hall is a whirlwind of activity. You see tapestries being hung, gilded candelabras placed at each table, and platters of exotic fruits arranged in towering displays. The staff polishes every goblet to a mirror shine. A hush of excitement sweeps through the halls as a rumor goes round. Leonardo's here, setting up his machine. You follow the murmurs and find him near a massive hearth in the kitchen's grandest wing. His brow is furrowed, but not in frustration. It's the concentrated look of a craftsman fine, tuning his masterpiece. A huge bird, likely a specially procured turkey, though turkeys were not common in Europe until the Columbian exchange, so this might be a prized novelty, sits marinating in aromatic spices. One mainstream historical fact is that early Renaissance banquets were notorious for introducing new and exotic foods whenever possible. Peacock, swan, even the occasional imported turkey to wow guests who'd never seen such a bird. You can tell this roast is meant to be the star attraction. Leonardo instructs 2 apprentices to lift the counterweights. As they move, the chains rattle softly. You watch him adjust a small lever that will control the tension. Everything moves like clockwork. No squeaks, no sudden lurches. The contraption feels far more polished than its earlier incarnations. Da Vinci's calm demeanor suggests he's proud of how far it's come. Before long, the Duke himself strides in, accompanied by a retinue of courtiers. Dressed in sumptuous fabrics, they pause to marvel at the device. One of them jokingly wonders if it can juggle the bird before cooking it. At first joke, you imagine Leonardo giving a polite smile, thinking, "Let's not push our luck." Signor. The Duke glances at Leonardo, an expectant twinkle in his eye, as if to say, "This had better work." Servants carefully impale the massive turkey on the spit rod. A hush falls over the group, punctuated only by the crackle of the hearth. With measured precision, Leonardo releases the gear mechanism. For a moment your breath catches. What if it whips the bird around like a runaway carnival ride? But it doesn't. The spit rotates in a steady, confident rhythm, the turkey gliding over the flames with an almost regal poise. A collective sigh of relief sweeps the kitchen. The Duke's grin broadens. If this demonstration holds, the upcoming feast may well be the talk of the entire region. A few servants even clap quietly, remembering the comedic disasters of previous tests. The turkey's skin begins to sizzle and glisten in the heat, wafting succulent aromas that make your stomach rumble. As time passes, the hall fills with guests. Musicians tune their instruments near a raised platform. You wander among the growing crowd, overhearing bits of conversation about the legendary device. "I heard it was inspired by Greek automata," one scholar remarks. Historians still argue whether Da Vinci lifted the principles directly from Archimedes' lost texts. Another retorts, as though they're discussing a state secret. You realize that for these sophisticated elites, the device is more than just a kitchen tool. It's a statement of intellectual and artistic prowess. When the banquet officially begins, the turkey is still roasting. Wine is poured, toasts are offered, and various courses come and go. Then, at the perfect moment, timed by Leonardo's careful calculations, a group of servants wheels in the hearth setup, complete with the rotating spit, so the guests can witness the final stage of cooking. It's an impressive sight. Flames dance around the polished metal, the turkey spins serenely, and the entire hall seems to fill with an almost reverent silence. You glance at the faces of the onlookers. Some are wide-eyed in genuine wonder, others are nodding with smug approval,